speaking of things we're on the same page about, Trump is a fucking criminal.
Dude, Trump is a fucking criminal. Now, to be fair, he's not a criminal yet. Right? Yeah, he's not a criminal yet. He hasn't been convicted of a crime yet.
He's not been convicted of a crime yet. He has been indicted, which means like he is. I guess we should specify when we say that he's a fucking criminal, that's kind of the colloquial use of the word, the general colloquial. Like we are not saying that as a legal term. We're saying that as a kind of in the colloquial sense of it.
Sure. He has demonstrated criminality, but while we can't conclusively factually say Trump is a criminal yet, even though he definitely is, subtext, we can conclusively say Trump is a sexual assaulter.
Yes,
we
can say that.
A jury of his peers has concluded.
Yes.
So we want to walk through like what these cases are, where they stand, what's been proven, what's not, what's in the process of being investigated, and what that might mean for Trump and the rest of us and all of our fate in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Business Insider has a really good breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the information that I'm going to be discussing comes from the Business Insider article. So you should, if you want more information, you should definitely check out the Business Insider article about the Trump's docket.
Yeah, exactly. So there's one criminal case against Trump that is currently in process. There are a number of investigations. There are some civil cases, but there's one criminal case currently for which Trump has already been indicted. And so I think we should probably start there.
I agree.
So this is a case in New York, and Trump is being charged with 34 counts of felony counts of falsifying business records. So this case is being brought by the district attorney, Alvin Bragg. And essentially, Alvin Bragg has investigated whether Donald Trump had violated campaign finance laws in New York in connection with the hush money payments that he made to porn star Stormy Daniels in advance of the 2016 election. You know, you might be thinking, wow, it's getting to a point where a president can't even pay hush money to his porn star girlfriend anymore.
Yeah, because that happens. Because that is a normal presidential thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, the important thing here, is not the porn star, right?
Yeah.
It's not the affair, which happened in like the aughts, 2006, I think, or so. It's not even the paying of hush money.
Yeah.
Although, to be fair, if you properly disclose the payment of your hush money, it wouldn't really be hush money. But the problem here is that Trump, in an attempt to hide his hush money payments, falsified business records. So essentially, through Michael Cohen, his fixer and personal lawyer, who is a key witness in this case, he, allegedly made several payments to Stormy Daniels, amounting to a total of $130,000 to, get her not to talk about this affair with Donald Trump during the presidential election. So Cohen was directed by Trump to pay off Stormy Daniels, and Trump then reimbursed Cohen for those payments. And then in the Trump organization's books, they falsified those records in order to make it look as if, he had not made these payments. So he falsified records. And importantly, the suppression of a negative story is a campaign benefit.
Yeah.
And as a candidate for office, you can't buy benefits for your campaign without disclosing them as part of as a campaign contribution.
Yeah.
And so to pay someone off with your campaign funds or even personal funds in order to benefit your campaign is a campaign either expenditure or contribution. And so hiding that is a falsification of, a business or public document.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd just like to point out, considering how much he is and has proven to be Teflon Don, I don't even think he needed to do this.
Yeah,
In fact, I
no
honestly
kidding.
think that if he had just come out and said, yeah, you see that porn star over there? Totally did her. He would have probably gained support.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even think he had to do this. But yeah, the important thing is campaign contributions are usually defined as something of value.
Yes.
And suppressing a story is something of value. So this is basically no different from if he paid that, what was it, $200,000?
$130,000.
If he had paid that $130,000 just directly to his campaign,
Yeah.
which you're allowed to do. Like there are limits to how much people can donate directly to your campaign, except you. You can donate it. You can give as much as you want,
But you have to write it
you
down.
have to disclose it. Yeah, you have to write it down. So
Yeah.
this is no different from if he had done that.
Yeah.
And then just didn't disclose it. And
Totally.
another important point that you have to remember when it comes to this case is the fact that we already know that this is a crime that is worthy of being prosecuted for and sent to jail for, because Michael Cohen, the guy that he did the crime with, was prosecuted and convicted of this crime and spent time in prison for this crime.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty damning stuff. Like, it's just,
Game, set, match, son.
yeah. Someone has already been convicted for this particular instance of this particular crime. So it does seem pretty likely that this is going to finally be a criminal charge that sticks to Trump.
Yeah. And it turns out, related to that, there is also a lawsuit currently being alleged against Donald Trump by Michael Cohen that alleges that while Michael Cohen was imprisoned, that he was basically unfairly punished. So apparently, in the spring of 2022, he was actually put under house arrest, put under home confinement for about 3 months. And a big part of this was basically that, like, it was during the pandemic. It was to try to prevent the spread during the pandemic. And I mean, Michael Cohen's not really an at-risk person. He's probably not going to go out and commit violent crimes if he's put under house arrest. So, that makes sense. But while he was under house arrest, he was talking to the news. He was writing his book. He was doing a tell-all book. And during that time period, he alleges that he was vindictively thrown into solitary confinement, like taken out of house arrest and thrown into solitary confinement when he refused to stop speaking to the press. Which, by the way, the judge ordered him released from that 16 days later. Which, by the way, 16 days in solitary confinement.
Oh my gosh, that's a long time.
That's already, like, solitary confinement should not exist. It should not exist for the most hardened of criminals. But he's alleging this happened due to vindication. And he is seeking $20 million in damages from Trump.
So a couple thoughts. One, there's almost no way that this doesn't get totally dismissed. Because, we just don't have a good path for criminals to sue for their treatment while
true.
being, held. That's one thought. My second thought, though, is it would be awesome if he somehow won. And it'd be awesome for like two reasons. One, fucking take money from Trump. Absolutely, this is great. But two, if this established a precedent where like certain number of days in solitary confinement equaled, millions and millions of dollars, I would love to see solitary confinement like bankrupted out of use by like I don't, again, that's not going to happen, but
I should also say, in terms of where the case is now, it was dismissed in November, but Cohen has filed an appeal, so it's still potentially out there. But it was initially dismissed.
Yep.
And I do think you're right. I do think there's a good chance that it goes nowhere, but that is still fucked up.
Yeah, it is. It really is. One thing that's interesting about this criminal case as well is that Alvin Bragg did attempt to convince the judge to basically like bar Trump from leaking any documents related to the case or like talking about the case, basically like a gag order, because
They know who Trump
historically,
is. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Historically, Trump has incited, you know, or at least like encouraged, violence against people that have brought cases against him, including Alvin Bragg, including Letitia James, who we'll talk about.
Yeah.
Now, the judge did decline to do this, saying, quote, "Please refrain from making statements that have potential to incite violence, create civil unrest, or jeopardize the safety of any individuals," and did leave open the possibility of implementing a gag order in the future. But basically, his bar was, because Trump is running for president, he needs to, and he needs to basically have full access to kind of his First Amendment rights. So we'll see what happens. Trump has like been talking about cases against him just as irresponsibly as he usually does. So we'll see whether he's actually able to keep his big mouth shut for his own benefit.
Yeah.
But that's kind of an interesting turn of like the fact that you've got the loudest possible obnoxious person as the defendant in this case.
Yeah. And so far, Trump's main defense can be summarized by 3 words: political witch hunt.
Which is not a defense that you can mount.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but like
And
someone is prosecuting me for crimes. Like the implication of political witch hunt is the motivations for this crime are bad, but there's no like claim that, it's not true, although he did plead not guilty. So like saying political witch hunt basically means I did it, but this is wrong. And that's not a defense.
yeah. Yeah. Next, let's talk about Fulton County election interference probe.
Yes. So this is a criminal investigation into Trump.
Yes.
So we do not yet have an indictment, which is important, but this is like one of my favorites. This is like my favorite one. It's so juicy. So Fulton County, Georgia District Attorney Fannie Willis is investigating Trump and some of his Republican associates in connection with the 2020 presidential campaign for a couple of things. One, they're looking into an alleged scheme to provide a fake slate of electors to Georgia. And 2, the request made to Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger from Trump on this, like on the phone call you might have heard, where Trump basically asked him to quote unquote find additional votes in order to make him president. And so apparently a special grand jury has recommended multiple indictments, according to like the forewoman of the grand jury, who is, they're supposed to be kept fully confidential, but she's like pretty interested in talking to the press, so we know that the grand
Is this
jury.
the one that keeps doing those weird like side winks to the camera?
I think she is. Yeah, it just like I don't know why. It's just kind of
It's like,
weird
oh,
when a
you'll
grand jury
see.
member also then wants to be like famous.
Yeah. Which, come on, don't, like, that's not what this is. I'm sorry, this isn't about you.
Yes, exactly. No, exactly. And like as a jury member, you should attempt to take yourself out of it as much as possible. You should
Yeah.
anonymize yourself as much as possible.
Honestly, you shouldn't be the jury forewoman if you're like, if that is your if that is your motivation, then you really shouldn't be like, it's endearing, but I don't need someone who's endearing. I need somebody who can do their damn job.
Yeah, and to the degree that like there could be risk to the indictment as a result
Yeah.
of like or even delays as a result of claims that like confidentiality is important, you don't want someone who's reckless.
Yeah.
In that position. But nevertheless, she has indicated or hinted that Trump is likely to be indicted or included in the indictments in this election fraud case.
Yeah. Which I actually remember when we covered this exact event.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when we talked about it, my exact words were, if this is not illegal, that is a failure of our entire legal system.
Yeah. Yes.
If it's not illegal, it should be.
I mean, he literally he was told how many votes he was behind Biden by, and he asked explicitly Secretary of State to go find that many votes. It wasn't
Yeah.
like go do a recount. It wasn't, ensure that there's no fraud, do an audit, none of those things. It was, I need 11,000 whatever votes. Go get them.
Yeah. Yeah. And so far, Trump's defense against this can be summed up with 3 words: political witch hunt. Lots of nuance.
Yes.
He's a very nuanced man.
He is a keen legal mind, no doubt about it. This one's my favorite though, because like it just, if this were to land and get him in prison, it would just be the nail in the coffin of like his election denialism, and all of like, it would finally be like, official that his attempts to overturn the election and influence a state's, presidential election were criminal.
Yeah.
And I would just love to see that.
Yeah. I like this one too, because so the message that I think, if he does end up getting charged with the Stormy Daniels case, the message that sends is nobody's above the law. Like,
Yeah.
the only reason why he didn't originally get charged with it was because he was president at the time, which, by the way, I think that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, you're basically saying we don't live in a republic, and if you're president, you're above the law. But the message that this sends, I feel like, is a much needed cautionary tale to other Republicans that have been starting to like go all in on, alleging voter fraud.
Yeah. And even putting in place mechanisms to do voter fraud in 2024.
Exactly. And I think that that's a good cautionary tale of, hey, you fuck with democracy, the law fucks with you.
Yeah.
And I think that's a much needed message, because Trump opened up a very scary can of worms. And
scary can of worms.
And like, if, this is one of those things where it could go two different ways. If he faces no consequences for that, then next time they're going to try even harder, and they might get farther.
Totally.
But if he does face consequences for that, hopefully we nip it in the bud.
Yeah, totally. Let's just pause for a second. I really like the visual of a very scary can of worms, because usually a can of worms is just like unruly and like hard to manage and silly. But like, I'm thinking of now like flesh-eating worms. They're like,
oh yeah, no, I was thinking tapeworms.
Oh God,
like
who wants a can of those?
I'm talking about tape. I'm talking about tapeworms.
The silent killer.
Silent but deadly.
So another criminal investigation into Donald Trump, this one from the Justice Department into the January 6th, into basically Trump's role in the January 6th attempt to overthrow the election. So basically, the Congress had put together a string of hearings, basically intended to build out a case against Donald Trump that he had incited the violence on January 6th and attempted to subvert the peaceful transition of power. That wasn't actually the purpose of the House committee investigation, because that's not what Congress investigations are for and can do. But it was a byproduct in that they gathered a ton of information via witness testimony and other like document subpoenas of like Trump's motivations and his role in inciting this violence. And as a result of the House investigation, 4 charges were recommended to be brought against Trump. 1, conspiracy to defraud the United States. 2, conspiracy to make false statements. 3, obstruction of an official proceeding. And 4, incitement to insurrection. And so to dig into this, Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, has appointed Jack Smith as a special counsel. Smith is a is a prosecutor, and at this point he's done a ton of subpoenas as part of this investigation, including subpoenaing Ivanka Trump, Jared Kushner, and former President Mike Pence. And to quote the fellows over at Pod Save America, which is my favorite way to refer to Mike Pence of Hangman Pence fame.
Yikes. With this, so this is the one investigation that I'm not quite sure about. I mean, I guess my thing is, I think if you want to argue that he indirectly incited violence, like that cannot be denied. Like that
Yeah.
it cannot be denied that if he hadn't stood up there and spoke about it, like, you know, said the shit that he did, that it wouldn't have happened. But at the same time, I feel like this also kind of opens up legal precedent regarding stochastic terrorism in general.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just something that I don't know if I'm entirely comfortable with there being a legal ramification for, because that drifts dangerously close into violations of free speech. You know,
Yeah.
like being charged with the actions of others that you did not directly tell them to do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I feel about that.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I don't know if this is, I don't think that this is as much of a legal slam dunk case as the other ones.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's certainly right in the case of inciting an insurrection. And luckily, I mean, not, I mean, the bar is high there, right? Like we're talking
Yeah.
about a criminal charge, which means conviction is beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty, so being, you know, inciting someone to insurrection is presumably a pretty high bar and difficult to clear. And so I agree that that's probably like one of the least likely ones. I think some of the other charges, you know, if they end up bringing them, like conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to make false statement, and
Yeah.
and maybe to a lesser degree obstruction of an official proceeding, like
Yeah.
conspiracy to defraud the United States. It's like you get together with a group of cronies, you talk about, you know, taking illegal action to defraud the United States, which is like discussing illegal options to like change the outcome of an election. And then you take a step in furtherance, or any of the conspirators takes a step in furtherance of that act. Right.
Yeah.
And like that to me seems like a much more likely scenario if they can build the case from subpoenaing the people that were in the room,
Yeah.
that each of
Potentially.
those
Yeah.
things was satisfied.
Yeah. Potentially. Yeah.
Yeah. And like,
I mean, because I feel like he did kind of like the things that we heard him say. He was not being direct. You know, anybody could watch that
yeah,
and think, you know, when he says fight like hell, anybody could watch that and I think still come to the potential conclusion that he was saying, you know, with your voice,
yes,
like
yeah,
stand outside there and shout and shout and shout and shout and shout.
mm-hmm.
He never directly said, you know, storm the Capitol and, you know, break into it and, you know, trespass on the Senate chambers.
Yes, totally.
I feel like that is there's too much that case rests too much on what was implied.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're talking about what was implied,
Yeah.
it's dangerous when we start to get into the territory of what you can legally be held accountable for, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's totally right. I'd be curious. Yeah, I think the other charges are just much more likely. I mean,
Yeah, I agree.
you know, talking
Totally
about
agree.
like, you know, conspiring of like how to convince Mike Pence
Yeah.
to, you know, neglect his duty to certify the election, like trying to force him to do that. That's like that sounds like conspiracy to defraud or you know, make false statements. And so we'll see what it ends up. But I totally agree, like about some of the incitement claims to be a little bit less slam dunk, unless we have some, you know, discovery of kind of direct involvement in some of the organizing of
Yeah.
the March on the Capitol. Because like,
Yeah.
you know, we know that recently a grand jury dealt out some of the most severe and significant convictions that they have for any of the rioters at the Capitol. So we saw that 5 leaders of extremist groups that were there, specifically the Oath Keepers, were found guilty of seditious conspiracy in their cases, which are some of the most significant charges that were brought and the most significant, you know, cases brought. And so, and we know that there were Trump surrogates who were directly interacting with the Oath Keepers and like even encourage them to be there or ask them to be there. And so like, I think it's possible to end up drawing that connection, but if we do, we got to make it. It's got to be a slam dunk. It's got to be rock solid.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that if we do see more of that, if we do see any more evidence of that, then of course I think the calculus changes.
Yeah.
Next, of course, we have Trump's handling of classified documents.
Yeah.
Which,
Yeah.
okay, this is one of those things where the Trump team will continue to try to make the argument that it was discovered that Joe Biden had some classified documents. It was discovered that Mike Pence had some classified documents. And I think that that does certainly give you pause in thinking,
Mm-hmm.
why the fuck are we letting public officials do that?
Well, yeah. Well, that's certainly true. I think it gives me pause in like two avenues. One is, what the fuck, to your point?
Yeah.
Why are these people taking their classified work home with them in
Yeah.
like folders? Like, what? But two, it makes the case a little bit weaker and more complicated in like the court of public opinion.
Yeah.
Because it's just harder to say that what Trump did was terrible and wrong if it's like kind of a normal mistake for people to make.
Yeah.
I
That
think
being
the
said,
Good.
it is different for Trump
Mm-hmm.
because he initially, like the FBI initially came to him and said, "Hey, bro, you got some classified documents, cough them
Mm-hmm.
up." And Trump was like, "Okay," and gave them some of the documents, but not all of the documents.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with Biden and Pence, they were much more they were much quicker to hand everything back to the
Sure.
back to the investigators. And the thing is, like, I think that the people that were initially investigating this, the FBI,
Mm-hmm.
I think they were initially a little bit too cavalier, and they asked a
Mm-hmm.
little bit too nicely of both of Biden, of Pence, and of Trump to hand back stuff that they never should have had.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that there should be some further investigation into that on all three of that in all three of those cases.
Sure.
But the fact that they gave him the opportunity to give them back and he didn't give them all back,
Mm-hmm.
that is the part that should really stick. That is the part
Yeah.
that should really give you pause.
Yeah.
Because why wouldn't you, unless there were potentially nefarious reasons?
Sure. And again, it's becoming more and more clear that it wasn't just a mistake.
Yeah.
Right. It's still heinous that you could have 15 boxes of documents and you've got classified material that you can mistakenly lose track of. and like when you do, but like the requirement is like you do an audit of your documents to determine if you have classified material. Like there are standards that you've got to meet when you provide these documents back. So it's not just like that it's a mistake either. There's more and more evidence coming out that like they handled these documents, they were being moved, they were seemingly aware of them. And so it was some kind of intentional obstruction of the government's like reclamation of these documents and their potential investigation into, his handling of them. That is in some ways the more serious of the charges. It's not just mishandling of them, but it's then the seemingly willful obstruction of their of reclaiming those documents and into his handling of them in the first place.
Apparently, I have more regulations on how I am supposed to handle information regarding students' grades than fucking former presidents and fucking former vice presidents do when it comes to handling top secret documents, some of which are nuclear secrets.
Yeah. Yep. So this is another one of the cases that's being investigated by Jack Smith. So he's the special counsel on both these Justice Department cases against Trump. Okay. Lawsuits. We're just through the criminal investigations and charges.
Yeah.
Let's talk about New York Attorney General's filing a lawsuit against the Trump family and organization. So this is Letitia James, and basically she has uncovered a pattern, a decades-long pattern of Trump's organization inflating their value, the nominal value of their assets in order to get large loans of cash, but falsifying a low value of their assets in order to pay lower taxes. And so she has put together a pretty significant lawsuit after a 3-year investigation that basically seeks to basically remove the Trump organization from being able to operate in the state of New York, as well as require them to pay back $250 million that Trump allegedly pocketed by misleading banks by overstating the value of his assets.
Damn. I
And
bet he wishes he was a real billionaire now.
yeah, exactly. And also seeks to ban Trump and his and multiple family members from ever running companies in New York State again. So basically, not only seeking to reclaim a bunch of money, but also shut down the Trump organization's operations in New York pretty much entirely.
Yep. And once again, Trump's main legal defense is political witch hunt.
How dare you?
That's a common theme. Like almost all of these, he's just that's all he has to say. Like he hasn't given really any substantive arguments against it. It's just political witch hunt, which I mean is going to appeal to his ardent base of supporters, but I mean we're talking about the court of law.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Sorry, bro.
Yeah.
Next we have
a third of
there's
the country,
there's actually a civil case on the incitement of the insurrection on January 6th. I don't think we need to get too into this.
Yeah, totally.
But it's kind of the same general thing, but that we talked about earlier. But in terms of whether he is civilly liable for what he did. The one part that I thought was kind of interesting, and that does kind of give me a little bit pause of my initial reaction of, concerns over
incitement to insurrection.
Yeah. There was a federal judge that actually had rejected Trump's initial bid to try to dismiss the lawsuits. And in his ruling, he said, quote, that the rhetoric on January 6th was, quote, akin to telling an excited mob that corn dealers starve the poor in front of the corn dealer's home. Which, I mean, that's not a bad argument.
Yeah.
That's kind of true.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
To be fair, the reference is old-timey and legal and stuffy, but I think you're right. Like, ultimately,
I mean,
whether
I
you're
grew up
inciting
near a cornfield.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, cornfields still exist, but clearly it's citing some kind of like some previous precedent.
And I lived in Iowa for 2 years. I mean, Iowa is basically just corn.
Corn and anger and violence about corn. It's all corn. I mean, it's corn all the way down.
You'd be surprised. They take their corn very seriously.
Even calling it corn is an insult. There's so many different kinds and varieties.
Yeah. Different professions. They have cornographers.
Cornographer.
That was a terrible joke. That was a terrible joke.
Ribbed for pleasure.
That was a terrible joke. I can't believe I said that. No,
really
everybody unsubscribe to the pod. Stop listening to us.
No, do not do that.
I'm done.
We need a living. We need to make a living. But I agree with you. And like the where you say the thing matters, where and when in the context and circumstances matters in terms of its relationship to incitement to violence, which is the limit on kind of free speech. So we'll see where that goes. I kind of am a little bit hesitant, like not only because we already talked about like the difficult tenuous relationship there, although the burden of proof in a civil lawsuit is only preponderance of the evidence, not beyond a reasonable doubt. So like 51% standard. But at the same time, like I'm a little bit dubious of the standing of House Democrats and the Capitol Police officers that are involved in this case, just because like, maybe the Capitol Police officers have a case. I don't know that the House Democrats do, but
I mean, they were the ones that were being stormed at.
Totally.
So, I mean,
maybe that's right.
I think there might be some standing there. Yeah. Like they were,
I mean, they were definitely hiding in the basement, scared for their lives. So that's
and
usually
also,
an indication.
And also, these people were taking shits in their office. I mean, I'd be like,
totally. Yeah, where are the janitors in this case? They should be parties to this case.
Yeah, the
had to clean up.
I had to clean up shit on the floor.
Domestic terrorists shit. It's way worse than normal shit.
Yeah,
it's shit used as a weapon of terror.
Yeah. Well, and you know that those people do not like they do not get enough fiber in their diet.
No way. Yeah. It's all
Um,
solid and liquid. There's no
yeah.
in between.
Like it's it's because of all the corn.
It's the corn.
It's the corn. They eat too much corn.
This is going to become like a conspiracy theory. Okay, all right. Let's get
Cornography
down.
files.
Let's get down to real business and talk about the E. Jean Carroll
Yes.
case.
Yes. Yes.
So, E. Jean Carroll is a advice columnist who is suing Trump for, or did sue Trump for defamation, battery, and is suing Trump for emotional distress. So, the background here is that in 2019, E. Jean Carroll wrote in a New Yorker cover story that Trump had sexually assaulted her in a Bergdorf Goodman dressing room in the mid 90s. Trump then accused her of lying, said all kinds of heinous shit, as he's wont to do, and basically opened the door for a defamation claim by E. Jean Carroll.
Yeah.
So what's interesting to me about this particular case is the combination of claims in the lawsuit, because it's not just defamation, right? It's not just he said something about me that was intentionally false in order to harm my reputation and therefore I'm entitled to damages. It's also battery.
Yeah.
And this is possible because in New York, there is a law that gives sexual assault accusers an extended window to file civil cases if they include rape allegations, right? Which is basically being able to say, like, if you have a sexual assault allegation, you can try to go the criminal route, but you can also go the civil route to try to punish and reclaim damages. And but often statute of limitations, the limitation on the amount of time you have to file a lawsuit, is a big limiting factor in who can come forward, because it limits
Which
when
that
you
right
can come
there
forward.
is probably worthy of a segment in and of itself.
Totally.
Like there's some things like, petty theft or whatever where statute of limitations totally makes sense.
Mhm.
But like there's no statute of limitations on murder
Mhm.
because it's, we recognize that that's something that is a particularly heinous crime.
Mhm.
I don't understand why there's a statute of limitations on rape.
Yeah. Totally.
Like that
I agree.
that does not make sense to me.
Yeah, I agree. Especially because, like, why raise the barrier even higher? Because
Yeah.
as you get further and further from a crime, it gets more and more difficult to collect all the evidence necessary to prove it in the first place. So you're already at a disadvantage the longer you are from the incident.
Well, and also like the damages to the victim for like a smaller crime are probably not going to be as severe further down the line. I mean,
Mhm.
you rob a liquor store.
Yeah.
You steal a $40 bottle of rum or some shit. After like 10 years or so, that's nothing to the liquor store.
Mhm.
I mean, how is that going to affect them?
Yep.
But
Yep.
you rape somebody 10 years down the line, they're still going to have that trauma with them.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
the victims are going to be affected for significantly longer for stuff like sexual assault than they would
Sure.
be for something like petty theft.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So, but you're right. We should do a segment on statute of limitations and what crimes should or shouldn't be included. But luckily, E. Jean Carroll had an opportunity to file the civil lawsuit against Trump.
Yeah,
And
and she was awarded $5 million.
she won.
Yeah.
Which means that a jury came to the conclusion that it was more likely than not that Trump sexually assaulted her in the 1990s and also defamed her.
Yeah. Which, to be fair, they had a really key eyewitness that had specifically stated that he had seen Donald Trump sexually assault people. Spoiler
was
alert, it was Donald Trump.
Yeah. That's
when he
yeah.
admitted that he likes to grab women by the pussy without asking.
Yep.
Which is sexual assault.
Yes.
And that video was used during the procedure.
Yes, it was a part of the evidence.
So he was a key witness
Against himself. It's true. But then Trump, with his big ass fucking trap, hilariously went and made the same kinds of insults against Carroll that he had before. And so Carroll amended another defamation claim against him about other comments to include the most recent remarks that he put out after he was convicted of sexually assaulting her. And so now she has a second case against Trump, similarly about emotional distress and defamation, where she is seeking $10 million in damages, which is just awesome. I would just love if this was just a cash cow for her, like forever, and just like every
just
time
win a case, wait for him to say something stupid, sue him again, win the case, wait for him to say it again. Yeah,
Just like to finally turn his lack of self-control against him.
Yeah.
Amazing.
yeah.
So we have something we have to touch on before we close out this segment. Nathan, what does this mean for Trump becoming president in 2024?
So I think that this helps him in the primary, but hurts him in the general.
I think you're right.
I think that this energizes Republicans to support him even more.
Mm-hmm.
Like the most hardcore base of supporters. I think that like as soon as the indictment happened, he shot up in the polls against Ron DeSantis. To be fair, that's because voters started to,
hear from Ron DeSantis.
But like, I think that this helps him in the primary. But I think that in the general election, this does not look good.
Yeah.
Like, this is not going to look good. And I think there's a lot of normie types that remembered how chaotic his first administration was.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's any hope that the second one will be less chaotic, all of these legal troubles that are just piling on, that ain't going to sell it to him.
Yeah, it destroys that hope. I think you're spot on. We just haven't seen the announcement of these indictments or even like his conviction in the Eugene Carroll case or loss of the Eugene Carroll case, I should say, hurt his polling among like his base.
Yeah.
Like he just is as popular as ever. And I think like say he's convicted for the falsification of business records in New York, he could face, I think, 4 years in prison for every count, although they'd probably all be served concurrently. So like 4 years in prison. Say he gets convicted for that, prior to the primary. There's going to be so much like Trump was wrongly convicted, blah. Like there might be more momentum for him going into the primary in a case like that. But it's going to be really hard to campaign.
But just imagine a president running for office from prison.
Yeah.
God, that is...
Yeah. Especially a front runner. But importantly, one thing to call out, like, I think you're right about it hurting him in the general. I just think the hardcore base, which is enough to put him over the top in the primary, is likely not enough. Well, it's definitely not enough to put him over the top in the general. And there's just no sense in which like any swing voters or even people maybe on like the next like further extreme end would still go for him outside of his like hardcore MAGA base. And importantly, there's nothing that prevents someone from running or even becoming president as a felon or even while they're in prison. I think it would be logistically difficult because then you got to imprison all your, security and all that stuff. But still, there's no like legal impediment to that. So we've screwed the pooch on that when he wasn't convicted at his impeachment trial. And so like, the impediments for 2024 are political, not legal.